Your soulmate is preparing to return to your life, but there's a problem. My beloved child. Your soulmate is preparing to return to your life, but there is one problem neither of you expected, and if you ignore the signs appearing around you now, the moment you've been waiting for could slip away before you even recognize it. Somewhere, they have already begun questioning everything they once believed about the distance between you. Memories they tried to bury refuse to stay silent. Familiar places suddenly remind them of your voice. Ordinary moments keep turning into unexpected reminders of what was left unfinished. Yet every time they take one emotional step closer, something invisible seems to pull them back again. Is it fear? Is it pride? Or is someone quietly influencing the decisions they are about to make? Don't skip, because the answer isn't as simple as it seems, and the next piece of this story changes everything you thought you knew. Your soulmate never truly forgot what existed between you. They simply convinced themselves that moving forward would be easier than facing the emotions they left behind. But lately, that illusion has started falling apart. A conversation they never expected, a familiar song, even a random photograph has awakened feelings they believed had disappeared forever. They've begun wondering if walking away was the biggest mistake of their life. Still, just as hope begins to grow, an unexpected obstacle rises in front of them. Someone close to them keeps planting small doubts, not obvious enough to notice immediately, but powerful enough to slow every decision they try to make. That person isn't controlling your soulmate, they're simply feeding fears that already existed. And that's what makes this situation so dangerous. Stay till the end, because the identity of that influence isn't the biggest surprise. What your soulmate chooses to do next is. Right now, they are standing between two futures without realizing how little time remains before one path disappears forever. One future leads back toward the connection they secretly miss every single day. The other leads to another season of silence, regret, and unanswered questions. The strange part is that they already know which direction their heart wants to follow, but their mind keeps demanding certainty that life can never promise. This inner battle has become impossible for them to ignore. They've started paying attention to little coincidences they once dismissed, wondering why thoughts of you arrive at the exact moments they need comfort the most. They don't understand why your name keeps resurfacing in conversations or why every attempt to forget somehow brings them closer to remembering. Something huge is waiting for you, because the next decision your soulmate makes won't happen by accident. And the hidden reason they're finally preparing to return has nothing to do with chance. Everything shifted after one quiet moment they never planned for. They weren't searching for answers when reality interrupted them, but sometimes the smallest event carries the greatest truth. A single conversation forced them to stop pretending they had completely moved on. They smiled on the outside, yet inside they realized they had been comparing every new experience to the memories they shared with you. That realization frightened them more than they expected. If these feelings were still alive after all this time, what else had they been hiding from themselves? The problem suddenly became clearer, but not easier. Returning now would mean facing questions they had spent months avoiding. Would you still recognize the person they've become? Would you even want to hear what they have to say? Those unanswered questions have slowed every step they wanted to take. Meanwhile, something else has been happening behind the scenes. The people around your soulmate have started noticing subtle changes in them. They pause before speaking whenever your name is mentioned. They seem distracted during conversations that once held their attention. Even the plans they were so certain about no longer excite them the way they used to. Someone close quietly asked, "Is there still someone you haven't forgotten?" Instead of answering, they looked away. That silence revealed more than words ever could. But here is where the real obstacle appears. Your soulmate believes too much time has passed. They fear that reaching out now could reopen old wounds instead of healing them. They keep telling themselves, maybe it's already too late. Yet every day that thought grows weaker while the desire to return grows stronger. Don't skip, because the next discovery will force them to make a choice they can no longer postpone. Then, without warning, they uncovered something they never expected to learn. A misunderstanding they had accepted as truth suddenly began to fall apart. Small details they once ignored started connecting like missing pieces of a puzzle, making them question everything they believed about why the distance between you happened in the first place. The more they reflected, the more they realized that some of their biggest fears had been built on assumptions rather than facts. That realization filled them with equal parts hope and regret. Hope, because perhaps not everything was lost. Regret, because they could have returned much sooner if they had known the truth. Now they feel the weight of every moment they allowed to pass. Stay with this story, because the next step they take won't just change their future. It may reveal that someone else has been quietly shaping this entire journey from the shadows. For the first time in a long while, they stopped running from the silence. Instead of distracting themselves, they sat alone with the thoughts they had been avoiding for far too long. That's when another truth surfaced. The greatest obstacle was never the distance between you, it was the fear of what would happen if they returned and discovered that everything had changed. They imagined reaching out only to find that the opportunity had already slipped away. That possibility haunted them more than staying silent ever did. Yet something inside refused to let the story end that way. Every attempt to convince themselves to move on only brought them back to the same question: what if this connection was never truly finished? The more they asked it, the harder it became to ignore. At the same time, unexpected signs began appearing in ordinary moments. They found themselves revisiting places they hadn't thought about in months. A familiar phrase from a stranger instantly reminded them of something only you would have said. Even their dreams became unusually vivid, leaving them awake with emotions they couldn't explain. None of these moments seemed important on their own, but together they created a pattern that was impossible to dismiss. They started realizing they weren't simply remembering the past. They were preparing themselves to face it again. Still, one final emotional barrier remained. Your soulmate believed an apology alone would never be enough. They felt they needed to return with honesty, clarity, and the courage to reveal everything they had kept hidden. Stay till the end, because that moment is closer than they realize. But while your soulmate was quietly gathering the courage to come back, another unexpected development changed everything. Someone who had once encouraged them to walk away suddenly admitted they might have been wrong. It wasn't a dramatic confession or a shocking confrontation. It was a simple sentence spoken almost casually, yet it echoed in your soulmate's mind for days. Maybe you gave up on something that deserved another chance. Those words shattered the last excuse they had been holding on to. Now they can no longer blame timing, distance, or uncertainty. The only thing standing between them and their return is one decision they have been postponing for far too long. And just when they believe they're finally ready to make it, a hidden truth about your connection comes to light, one that neither of you has seen before, but that could change the meaning of every moment that led to this point. A quiet realization settled over them before sunrise, and it refused to let go. They finally understood that waiting for the perfect moment had become nothing more than another way to avoid vulnerability. There would never be a flawless time to return. There would only be one honest moment, and they were getting dangerously close to it. Their heart kept replaying every unfinished conversation, every word left unsaid, every goodbye that never truly felt complete. Instead of bringing peace, those memories demanded action. They could no longer convince themselves that silence was protecting anyone. It was only creating more distance. Don't skip, because the next choice they make isn't based on emotion alone, it comes after discovering something that completely reshapes how they see your story together. As they looked back with clearer eyes, they noticed details they had overlooked before. Moments that once seemed ordinary suddenly carried a different meaning. They realized you had offered understanding when they only saw uncertainty. You had shown patience while they were overwhelmed by fear. The picture they had created in their own mind no longer matched reality. That realization brought both comfort and regret. Comfort, because the connection wasn't as broken as they once believed. Regret, because they had allowed doubt to speak louder than truth. Now another question began following them everywhere. If they had misunderstood the past so deeply, what else had they been wrong about? The answer frightened them, because it suggested that the biggest obstacle was never another person, it was the story they had been telling themselves all along. Then came the moment they couldn't ignore. Without planning it, they found themselves reaching for something that reminded them of you, almost as if instinct had taken control before logic could interfere. Their heart was no longer asking whether they should return. It was asking how much longer they could keep pretending they didn't want to. Yet just as that determination began to grow, one final complication appeared. A piece of information surfaced that made them hesitate, not because it erased their feelings, but because it challenged everything they believed about your current life. If what they had just learned was true, then the next move they made had to be handled with extraordinary care. Because one wrong assumption now could either reunite two hearts or create a misunderstanding neither of you ever saw coming. An unexpected conversation became the turning point they never saw coming. They weren't looking for advice, yet someone casually mentioned that life has a strange way of giving people one final opportunity before closing a chapter forever. Those words lingered long after the conversation ended. Your soulmate couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another coincidence. They began asking themselves a question they had avoided for far too long: if I stay silent now, will I spend the rest of my life wondering what could have happened? That single thought outweighed every excuse they had been holding on to. For the first time, returning didn't feel impossible. It felt necessary. But necessity brings pressure, and pressure often reveals fears that have been hiding beneath the surface. Stay with this story, because the next discovery will force them to choose between protecting their heart and following it. The more they reflected, the clearer one truth became. They had spent so much time worrying about rejection that they never considered another possibility, that you might have been carrying unanswered questions of your own. Every memory now looked different through that perspective. Moments they once interpreted as distant suddenly seemed like quiet attempts to understand them. That realization filled them with both hope and humility. They no longer wanted to return simply to explain themselves. They wanted to listen. They wanted to understand everything they had missed while they were busy protecting themselves. Yet just as they found this new clarity, they heard something that unsettled them. Someone hinted that your life might have changed in ways they knew nothing about. The information was incomplete, uncertain, and impossible to verify, but it planted one final seed of hesitation. Was it truth, or another misunderstanding waiting to be uncovered? As these thoughts collided, your soulmate reached a point where standing still was no longer an option. They realized that every day spent wondering was slowly becoming more painful than the risk of hearing an answer they weren't prepared for. Fear had controlled the journey long enough. Now curiosity, hope, and unfinished emotions were beginning to take its place. They understood that if they truly wanted another chance, they couldn't rely on assumptions anymore. They would have to seek the truth directly, no matter where it led. And just when they gathered the courage to take that first genuine step toward you, something entirely unexpected crossed their path, a detail connected to your past that neither of you had fully understood before. What they uncover next won't just explain why this separation lasted so long, it may reveal that your reunion has been moving toward this exact moment all along. One small detail refused to leave their mind, and the more they examined it, the more everything began to make sense. They remembered a moment they had dismissed as insignificant, a conversation cut short, a message that never received the reply it deserved, a misunderstanding that quietly grew into a wall between two hearts. Looking back now, they could see how easily fear had filled the empty spaces where honesty should have lived. What once appeared to be rejection suddenly looked more like confusion. That realization was almost overwhelming. If they had misunderstood something so important, how many other pieces of your story had they gotten completely wrong? Don't skip, because the answer waiting ahead is far more surprising than they ever imagined. Instead of rushing forward, your soulmate decided to slow down for the first time. They wanted their return to be different from everything that came before. No rushed emotions. No assumptions. No expectations that reality would perfectly match the dreams they had carried for so long. They knew that if they truly wanted another chance, it had to begin with sincerity rather than certainty. Quietly, they started letting go of the pride that had protected them for so long. It wasn't easy. Every step forward required leaving another layer of fear behind. Yet with every honest reflection, they felt lighter, almost as if the weight they had carried for months was finally beginning to disappear. Something huge is waiting for you, because the decision they're about to make won't be driven by impulse, it will come from a place they've never reached before. Then, just when they believed they finally understood everything, one last mystery appeared. Someone unexpectedly revealed a forgotten piece of the past, a detail that had never been shared completely with either of you. It wasn't dramatic enough to make headlines, yet it was powerful enough to rewrite the meaning of everything that happened after your paths separated. Your soulmate realized that the story they had believed for so long was missing its most important chapter. If this newly uncovered truth is accurate, then the distance between you wasn't created by fate alone. It grew from one hidden misunderstanding that neither heart ever had the chance to correct. And now, standing on the edge of finally returning, your soulmate knows there is only one way to discover what is real, but what they are about to hear may change not only their future, but yours as well. The closer they came to the truth, the quieter they became. It wasn't because their feelings were fading, it was because they finally understood how powerful the next moment could be. Every careless word could reopen old wounds. Every honest word could begin healing them. They found themselves replaying countless possibilities, wondering how your eyes would look if you saw them again after everything that had happened. Would there be surprise? Relief? Hesitation? They couldn't predict the answer, but one thing had become impossible to deny. Their heart was no longer searching for reasons to stay away. It was searching for the courage to come back. The problem that once seemed impossible was no longer standing in front of them. Now it was standing inside them, waiting for one final decision. As the days passed, something unexpected started happening. The fear that had once controlled every thought slowly gave way to determination. Instead of imagining everything that could go wrong, your soulmate began imagining what could finally go right. They realized they weren't hoping to return to the past, they were hoping to build something stronger than what had existed before. That changed everything. Old regrets became lessons instead of chains. Old mistakes became reminders of how much they had grown. For the first time, they stopped asking whether they deserved another chance. They began asking whether they were finally ready to honor one if it appeared. Stay till the end, because just when confidence starts replacing fear, an unexpected confirmation reaches them from a place they never expected. That confirmation doesn't arrive as a dramatic announcement or an unbelievable coincidence. It comes quietly, through a simple moment that feels almost ordinary, until they recognize what it truly means. A missing piece falls into place, answering a question that has haunted them since the day your paths separated. Suddenly, the confusion, the hesitation, and the endless second-guessing begin to dissolve. They understand that returning isn't about erasing the past, it's about facing it with honesty neither of you had before. Their next step is no longer a distant possibility. It is becoming a real intention. But just as they prepare to cross that final emotional distance, they discover one last truth about your connection, a truth so unexpected that it could either become the foundation of your reunion or the final test before your two stories finally meet again.